Hello, everyone. Welcome to InfoSystems podcast series regarding all things cybersecurity. I'm your host, Executive Vice President and CISO, Fred Cobb, and with me today, Senior Cybersecurity Strategist, also with InfoSystems, Mr. Rob Ashcraft. Rob, thanks for coming and joining me on this podcast episode. We're excited to have you. Thank you.
Thanks. Yep. Thanks for having me on.
For those of you that have been tuning in and watching our series, we just wrapped up quite a lengthy series on the CSC 20 controls, all 20 episodes dealing with the various controls for the Center for Internet Security, critical security controls. We're going to move on from that, and I've been wanting to talk about this particular subject for a while now, and because we were into the other series, I wanted to get through that first. But now that we've done that, something near and dear to my heart that I think is often overlooked in our space in particular, because let's face it, at our core, you and I are very technical people. We work with technical folks, engineers, cybersecurity architects, pen testers, all of that on a daily basis. And we tend to get caught up in the weeds of that quite often. But it's very important for us to talk about cybersecurity at a higher level. So I want to focus today, along with you, Rob, on cybersecurity as a business risk, another category as we look at all those risks out there facing business owners, facing key stakeholders in the business, stockholders, et cetera. So I guess, Rob, I'll punt it back to you here for just a minute or two in thinking about why cybersecurity should be considered a business risk in this day and age, along with some of the other things, economic risk, legal risk, seasonal risk, depending on your business, the COVID pandemic that's brought a risk to a lot of organizations. Why is cybersecurity one of those items that should be in a category along with some of those?
Right. So obviously, risk management itself is a much larger conversation as a whole, as you just mentioned. However, cybersecurity is an absolute essential part of a company's risk management program. So I was just thinking of a quote that I heard recently. It was actually one from a quote that I heard that was in an interview with you, actually. And the quote was, underestimating the cost of successful malicious activity against your organization can lead to large unplanned expense. And so when we think in terms of risk management, we're thinking of things that can impact the business negatively, and managing those different type of risks. So it's vital for business executives to have a clear understanding on how a cyber incident can impact their business or their organization. So anything from disruption of operations, loss of intellectual property, theft of finances, loss to the branding reputation, loss of customers, loss of revenue. The list goes on and on. I mean, costs just surrounding litigation caused by the cyber incident. Let's face it, cyber incidents can and have put companies out of business.
They have indeed. And that particular quote, and thank you for bringing that up, was specific to an upcoming magazine article on what are some of the things that are not considered when you're calculating your cyber budget. What are some of those arbitrary things or some of those out of left field things that might be out there waiting to be sprung on your organization when you're sitting down, you're calculating the budget for your cybersecurity staff or your MSSP, your SOC services, all those technical things. You're not taking into account as a business risk what you just mentioned, that that cyber incident that may be hugely disruptive to your organization. Yeah. So that's very key. And let's back up for just a moment. Let's think about how we got here. I mean, we could go on for days. How did we get here? But if you think about, we have chosen really as a society to be connected to this worldwide network. What is the internet? Could you operate in a vacuum without internet activity happening on your network? One could argue that you could to a large extent, but with all the cloud services available, and that can be controlled, but we have a tendency to let our staff as business owners maybe have more freedom because of the culture of the company. I don't
Sure.
know, speaking to how company culture might affect the business risk associated with cybersecurity.
We'll be back with the Cybersecurity Weekly podcast after we pause for this special message. Security analysts believe cyber attacks will continue to escalate throughout 2020 and are recommending that every company, regardless of industry or size, place immediate focus on cybersecurity training and the tools that will protect you from these attacks. Did you know that you can book a cybersecurity assessment right now with Fred Cobb's team of cybersecurity engineers at InfoSystems? They will help you discover exactly where you are most vulnerable to a cyber attack and make recommendations on how to strengthen your defense in those areas. This is urgent. It's an issue that affects everyone in our community. Visit the InfoSystems website at www.infosystems.biz to request your cybersecurity assessment. Now back to the podcast.
Well, I think a lot of it comes to understanding the rapidly changing threat landscape. And you mentioned, we've all chosen to make use of this great resource known as the World Wide Web and the internet. But I think of maybe retail companies that did not evolve as the use of the World Wide Web was rapidly changing. Well, some of those don't exist anymore, right? Because they just didn't understand they had to change as the web changed and as business changed on the web. Well, that also goes for protecting ourselves in this, again, I'll mention a rapidly changing threat landscape. And so, sticking your head in the sand and thinking that is not going to happen to us is not a good strategy. And companies do that, right? And that's I guess one of the postures they take is just to think that this is going to happen to somebody down the street, but it wouldn't happen to us. And I can't tell you how many times I've helped companies with incident response and incident recovery that never thought that they would even be on the radar of an attack. They're just a small company. Why would anybody want to try to hack them? And they don't understand this stuff happens very randomly. There's so much automated type of attacks going on. When they find an open door, they don't care whose car it is. They just want to get in and see what they can get. And
Right.
So, that's how bad things happen. A lot of this, as you mentioned, is a culture change. I guess I want to get back to that. I'll give a good example. When I was growing up, I lived out in the country. We never locked our house. Never locked our cars. We had a gun rack in the truck, we left the guns in there. We'd go on vacation and not lock our vehicles or our house. And so we didn't have to. But as times changed, then we realized, hey, we better start locking things up. Started locking, the outdoor sheds and all that. And now we've come into a time that we have security cameras and perimeter and motion detectors on our property and alarm systems in our house and that detect movement and glass shattering and the doors open, all that kind of stuff, right? Because the times have changed and they require greater measurements and protect. Well, the same, of course, is for businesses and organizations. The very same applies. The times have changed, so the culture around cybersecurity has to change.
Yeah. I long for the days you just described because I've been around long enough to remember those days as well. And but look at what the World Wide Web has done as far as enablement of folks or people, individuals, even groups, nation state actors. There's all kinds of terms for bad guys that can do you harm. And again, to your point about a lot of what they've created that's out there in the wild that could end up attacking your small company, it's a randomized attack, like you mentioned, or it's something that's out there running in an automated fashion, just picking victims, anything that comes along, anything and everything. Some of the basics are going to be looked at, and if they can probe deeper and deeper into the environment that is your business, bad things can happen. Look at all the phishing campaigns out there that businesses have to deal with. The risk there is, one person within your business could fall victim to a phishing attack, and the outcome could be very detrimental, to your uptime, to reputation, all of those bad things. Certainly, the bottom line with all the recovery expenses you may have to go through. So this may sound a little bit harsh, but sometimes when I think of business owners, even businesses that have to meet compliance regulations that choose to ignore them until their hand is caught in a cookie jar.
Right.
I think of all those businesses, and I think it's almost like it's a gambling addiction. They're always thinking, well, I can roll the dice. I cannot spend on that particular widget this quarter or this year, or it's too hard for me to comprehend. So I really don't need to pay any attention to it. It can't happen to me anyway. And time again, I know you and I on a regular basis, we experience along with companies that call us for help where they did roll the dice, they did gamble, and the marker was called, and they became a victim of the "it can't happen to me until it does," and it actually did. And some of the outcomes, like you say, I too have seen businesses completely shut down, out of business for what's happening. If the attacks are serious enough and the ability to recover data-wise has not been checked and kept up to date, or trial tested, those things.
Right.
So very, very difficult. So business.
Well,
yeah, go ahead.
I don't think it's being harsh, and I'll be honest with you, when I talk to technology professionals in different organizations, and they say, well, these certain business executives don't want to be inconvenienced for an extra few seconds, right, to use a multi-factor authentication, or in some type of encryption or other measures that we take. I just have to pause for a moment and sort of shake my head and think, okay, and I'm not trying to be mean or anything, but these are people that are kind of uninformed or just simply behind the times, and that very well could cost their organization tremendous losses by leaving them unprepared. I guess one thing I would say, if there's business executives watching this video, that tells me right from the start that at least they're interested and they're trying to find out and stay informed about why this is important, and really how cyber attacks can negatively impact their business. And so I guess we could talk about some areas, if you want, that ought to be considered when you're talking about cyber risk management.
Yeah, just before you get to that list there, and we want to definitely go through that. Something come to mind that I want to get on this particular podcast. A lot of times, it's almost like the executives of an organization will inadvertently do sort of like risk transference of the problem. In other words, say I'm a business owner and I'm big enough to go out and hire an IT team, or a cyber person, or I may even hire outsource services, to a large degree. But so if not that they're micromanaging something they don't know about, but they don't seem interested, maybe on a monthly, maybe on a quarterly basis. Hey, give me some high level stats on how we're doing. How often you see attacks happening? What are our defensive countermeasures to thwart those attacks? Are they good enough? How are we doing? Let's take some temperature. It's one of those things where, okay, here's a budget of $25,000. Here's a budget of $250,000. Depending on the size of the company. Make me secure. I don't want to hear about it. There's your money. And to me, that's such a narrow-minded approach, right?
Yeah. Instead of staying informed, there's, hey, I spent money on this, so I'm good to go, right? And it doesn't really work that way.
Yeah. One more thing. Up until recently, so many companies didn't take cybersecurity even as something serious that needed to be included on a budget line. When you're doing IT budget or company budgets, is one of those things. Well, yeah, we hear about it. Again, I've got some cyber insurance, and I'm not that company that would ever get attacked, or it can't happen to me. Keep coming back to that, but we hear it all the time. And just having that mindset of it's not that important. It is. It's as important as some of the other risk factors or the risk categories that we mentioned at the outset of this podcast. So I just wanted to get that out there, Rob, before you went through a couple items there on the list. So back to you.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, and super great points, without doubt. So yeah, I did make a little list up of some areas maybe to consider as you're thinking about your cyber risk management program, or including cybersecurity in your risk management program. I think we've touched on the first one, but let's just say it again real quick. Culture, the organization culture as it relates to cybersecurity has to change. It has to adapt to the now and to the evolving threat landscape. So leaders need to help establish a culture of cybersecurity and risk management in general throughout the organization. So, I mean, this starts with administrative type of controls like governance, structure, and communicating those things, policy and procedure throughout the organization, what the intent of the organization is as it relates to cyber risks, and also the expectations. So everyone really, all employees, all members of the organization become involved at one level or another.
Yeah, so culture is huge. We talked about the culture of the World Wide Web, and I've been in the opposite end of that spectrum, where you're working in classified areas, government facilities, where when you got to your desk or got to your office, you did not have internet access. You may have internet access, but you couldn't go out and surf the web. You couldn't go out and check your personal email, check your Facebook, check your Twitter account, which I don't have any of those accounts, so I can't check them. But a very locked down environment, and we walk into companies every day where they don't have any control over what their employees are doing as far as their surfability or other things. So, and a lot of that gets back to that word you use, culture of the company. So that's huge. But
yeah, I think another good one area to consider is just information sharing in general, right? So as you're getting that culture changed and you're involving all employees, cybersecurity is a team sport. And yes, generally IT is heavily involved in some of the technology controls and that, but really the whole organization in one way or another should be involved. So there are certain stakeholders within the company that have to be aware of certain risks, and especially shared risks across the company, and should be involved in some of the decision making. So a communication process that's in place that talks about communicating different. Have that in our own organization, and we help other organizations, whether it be recognizing some social engineering or phishing attacks, or things to watch out for in their cyber training. Just that open communication and information sharing, I think, is really important.
Yeah, and I promised at the outset of this podcast, at least I think I did, that we wouldn't get into too much technical speak. But since you mentioned information sharing, I mean, think about your handheld device, your iPhone, your Android, whatever you're using for personal communication. Most companies out there allow company email with bring your own device policy. So as a business owner, what are you doing to protect your digital assets that are hanging out on these phones that are being carried around, perhaps getting lost, perhaps being shared? What kind of mobile device management solutions do you have out there? So that's just in one of 1,000 things we could talk about there around that. But that's another good one you mentioned.
Yeah, another one is prioritizing, I guess, prioritizing risk. And this gets back to what you were saying just before we started into these ideas or concepts to think about, is organizations need to be more informed, and business leaders need to be more informed about cyber attacks and potential risks, how they can impact the company, the time horizon for impact, how likely certain ones are to materialize or happen, and be able to kind of prioritize different risks and different defenses against that. If you don't understand the threat horizon, how can you possibly prioritize your defenses against it?
Yeah. And I know, we've talked for a while, but I want to get one more thing out. Just today, I sent out to the cyber team and some of the management team here just some recent articles specific to the healthcare community.
Yeah.
Where, hey, the Office for Civil Rights is serious about healthcare data risk. So for those out there that are listening that are stakeholders, key players, with clinics, with hospitals, any company that's considered a covered entity in the healthcare space, I sent a list internal of companies that have been fined for healthcare security and compliance violations. Some of those fines are in the multi-million-dollar range. So as a business owner, if you're into the healthcare space, if you're providing services to the healthcare industry as a business associate, can you afford to not do the right thing and be subject to a multi-million-dollar fine when it's so easy to get out in front of that and take corrective action and become compliant? So if I sound a little bit passionate or semi-frustrated about that, I think as much as we continue to talk about it, we see it time and time again. It's just, but on the other hand, a lot of companies are doing well. We'll say that, but there's so many out there that's yet to be converted to a company that includes cybersecurity as part of their overall risk management structure. So I guess, Rob, we can close it down for now. Any final thoughts? I think we've shared some good information today. Maybe got some business owners thinking yes, cybersecurity should be a strong consideration.
Yeah, I guess I would say to the business owners or business leaders that are watching this podcast, tip my cap to you. That it demonstrates in itself that this is on your mind. It's important to you. And also, I guess I would be remiss in saying that our organization, InfoSystems, is involved in helping companies with risk management and some of these things that we mentioned and others that we can assist with and kind of bring a structure around cyber risk management. So I guess I'll end with that little statement there.
No, it's good. Good. Thanks for saying that. Again, thanks everybody for tuning in, either listening or watching the video. We appreciate always getting the opportunity to bring these topics up for discussion. We hope you take something away from it, and we'll have some new and exciting topics coming up as we continue on with the InfoSystems Cybersecurity series. So thank you very much, and we'll see you soon.
Yeah, thanks.